Often this process of disguise would involve incredible abuse and yelling at devotees, shifting attention as any good magician would do, thus creating in them great guilt as if it were their own sloppiness that had led to the misplacement of the food. Later he would be very tender with them, and they sensed that he had used them but not abused them. One time they ran out of ghee at Hanumangarh, and Maharaji asked the devotee in secret to get some water in a bucket and put it in the woods. Then he said, in his usual direct manner, "I have to go piss," and he went out. When he returned, he was yelling. He went over to a sadhu and berated him for not watching the supply. He said, "Thieves were going to steal the ghee." "Look," Maharaji said, "they have put a tin of ghee out there in the woods," and they brought in the bucket filled with ghee. A devotee was serving at Bhandara at Kanchi. They were starting to run out of malpuas, sweet puris, as the feast had continued for 10 days. When the people came, they began to give them chapatis and dal, but no malpuas. Then 60 or 70 women arrived from distant villages not just to see Maharaji but because they desired malpuas. Maharaji said, "Give them malpuas." A devotee told Maharaji that there were no more, and Maharaji upbraided him, saying, "You are a thief. There were plenty of malpuas. You have stolen them. Take the keys from him. I don't want him in the temple anymore. He should not have the keys to the storeroom. He has probably hidden the malpuas somewhere." When someone checked the storeroom, there were plenty of malpuas. Later, Maharaji was so loving and tender to the accused devotee. I was in Allahabad with Maharaji at Meta time. Maharaji said there were some mas who had come from Nainital and added. I was in Allahabad with Maharaji at Meta times. Maharaji said there were some mas who had come from Nainital and added, "Let's go to the Meta grounds and find them." We took a taxi, which Maharaji dismissed once we arrived. It was dark and many thousands of people were crowded there. Maharaji sent me and a friend to look, but we were fearful of losing him, so we made only a cursory inspection and rushed back, saying that we could not find the mas. Finally, Maharaji said he would go. In the third tent that he investigated, he found them just as they were finishing a puja to Maharaji. They had been doing this puja every day for 30 days, hoping for his darshan. This was the final day. They had even made an image of Maharaji. Maharaji walked in and stood at the back of the tent. Then he brought the mas to another devotee's house and sent us out for milk and sweets. We were students and did not want to spend all our money, so we said to each other, "After all, how much can a ma drink?" We brought small amounts of sweets and milk, for which Maharaji berated us and threw us out. We sat on the porch repentant. Later he called us into his room and asked, "Do you think I needed you to get sweets?" And there in the room were buckets and buckets of sweets, and Maharaji made us eat and eat. The retired superintendent of prisons of Lucknow, a very old and respected devotee, tells of his experience with Maharaji. The story is very special in that it reflects the faith of his wife, which was sufficient to allow her to let Maharaji's siddhi of Annapurna work through her. He would put you in the wrong catch, you unprepared, then help you. One night in Nainital, we had returned to our house for the evening meal, after having been with Maharaji much during the day. There were 4 of us, and my wife had prepared just enough food for our family. Then my small daughter heard Maharaji passing by on his way from the government house, and she went out and said, "Maharaji, we live here. Come to our house." I called her and said, "Don't bother Maharaji, we have been with him much today." Also I realized that we had only a little food. But Maharaji said, "No, I must go to your house." And he came in, bringing about 20 people. After a very few minutes he said to me, "These people are hungry, give them food." I wouldn't say no because I knew his strength. So I went toward the kitchen. Maharaji yelled, "And hurry up!" In the kitchen I whispered to my wife the dilemma we were in. We had only enough vegetables in the small pot for the 4 of us, and the market was far below and already closed. My wife, who had more faith than I, said, "Don't worry, Maharaji will take care of it. Here, take this small pot," which he had covered, "and don't remove the cover to look inside. And there is a large serving spoon. Just serve the people and I will make the puris." I did as she said, not looking inside. I knew it was going to be very odd. To each person I gave 1 or 2 large spoonfuls and then asked each, "Do you want more?" Some said yes, and I gave it to them. Everyone got as much vegetable and puris as they wanted. Maharaji was smiling. Then he said, "Everyone was taken. Everyone is full. There is a very big feast." A number of stories in the early days have filtered down about Maharaji. How much in fact and how much fiction is uncertain. Here is a delightful example. The village children of the area often came to the lake, herding their cows and goats. One day, seeing no one around, they hung their lunch bundles in the low-hanging branches of the trees and went off to play. They returned to find their lunches missing and Maharaji sitting contentedly under the tree. He smiled at the children, and in exchange for their food, he put pearls and laddus, a sweet particularly favored by Hanumanji, from under his garments. The children ate to their heart's content. Puris and laddus. Under Maharaji's blanket. The way in which Guru and devotee relate to one another varies immensely from devotee to devotee. In the holy books, it is said that a devotee might see the Guru in the roles of father, mother, child, friend, master, lover or God. And there were devotees who saw Mahar in each of these ways, Maharaji in each of these ways. By the sense of the way in which Maharaji Indians' devotee felt towards him is perhaps better captured by the word Baba than by the term Guru. Baba can mean grandfather or elder. It is a term of respect used with either an older person or a spiritual person. The sadhus or wandering renunciate of India are usually called Baba, and so is the old street cleaner. Its softness and familiarity better capture the quality of the play between Maharaji and his devotees. For some of them, he has seen primarily as the grandfather of the family. The fatherly affection he had given can't be gotten from anywhere else. For others, their Baba was their dear friend. When you love somebody, you play anything with them. That's what I did. I never thought differently. We travel together often and just talk about this and that. For many, he was a wise advisor. PD just come, ask him my questions and go. To some, he was just another saintly sadhu. He was just an ordinary Baba. He'd often come and we would give him a little sweets or a glass of water. He'd sit on a bare cot, and we felt so much bloated with pride because we fed a Baba today. My family was always had saints like Maharaji connected with them, but for them he was a guardian angel, as if from another realm. While with him I always felt protection from anywhere, from all things. Maharaji picks us from one spot and places us at another. Whenever we feel difficulty from any ordeals in our life, we always remember him. Then he always helps us, either directly or by giving some strength to others to help us. And for some, God, whoever had his darshan even from behind, is saved. Maharaji is the heaven sacrificial fire, accepting and burning my karma. He is beyond anything you could say of him. You see, he is God. That's of course who he is. All these categories are too specific, really, for most devotees. He was now one and now another to these, or he was all of them. Quite simply, he was their Baba. I didn't care about his miracles. I only knew that he was my Baba. One woman never thought of Maharaji as a great saint with power. He said that he didn't have them, so she believed him. She thought of him as a saintly, good and kind person who gave her love and affection and peace of mind. Her husband thought that Maharaji was God himself. In Maharaji's presence, both of them would forget their problems. I have never been afraid of him, never. It was not out of fear of him that I was tense and alert around him, but out of fear for him. For instance, if you have a flower garden and are caring for it, you are not afraid of the flowers, but of the horse and the cow who may trample or eat it, or of the gardener who may forget to water it. I was afraid, you see, that someone's carelessness might cause him inconvenience or pain, like your mother would feel. If you come home from school and she was not there, she'd worry about you. Who would feed or take care of you? It was like that. Among the Vaishnavas, there was only considerable heterogeneity in the ways of seeing Maharaji and being with him. Although many of us had extremely intimate relations with Maharaji, nevertheless, the more formal term Guru, with its emphasis as a vehicle for spiritual liberation, would seem a more appropriate label than Baba, because Gurus were not commonplace in the culture from which we had come. We tended to invest more heavily in the Guru mythos. We didn't particularly want a grandfather or another friend. We wanted God, or at least a divine intermediary. And that's how most of us saw Maharaji. In these quotations, some differences among us become apparent. One Western devotee speaks to another. I didn't need to be around him a lot. It was okay for everyone else who had to be around him constantly. I think that my traveling with you was good because you were a perfect complement to me. You had to be near Maharaji, you had to sit at his feet, you had to pick up every little detail, hear every little story, and I really loved that. It was really beautiful. But for me, all of that got in the way. That was not what I needed. I just needed the essence, the seed, the feeling. I remember one day he had eaten very well as usual, and we all napped afterward. But there was a feeling of what the Sufis called baraka, blessing or spiritual power. When we woke up, we were disoriented, but it felt so delightful. A lot of the real work for me was in that feeling I got after coming and taking prasad and relaxing. It was in this way that I experienced the actual baraka or blessing taking place. As I was crying all the time because Maharaji wouldn't take me to him inside his arms into the temple and fly me up into the sky. After that first contact with him, I became extremely eager, almost crazy to be inside his blanket. So I always tried to bargain, to find some way that I could get him to take me, and I realized very quickly that there was no way to do anything that could make him take me. I never felt that the words were really important. The true Guru is within, and Maharaji was a manifestation that I needed to see in order to understand that truth. Because of the longing for him and the sense of being in the presence of my own divine holy godmother, I always felt Maharaji to be as my mother. Maharani was like the Ma for me. Maharaji's relation to God was totally internal and subtle. It was just so fine to be with to be who you are, to be yourself. The playfulness was so infinite, the heart opening so wide. In the following comparison between the behaviors of the two of the devotees, another dimension or difference becomes clear. When devotee A was in the temple, it was predictable that if any Vaishnava were allowed near Maharaji, he would be there was no limit of the ingenuity he employed to remain in Maharaji's presence for every possible second. If Maharaji told people to go away, A would be the last or to leave and then might go immediately around the back of the building, pick a flower off a tree and arrive from the other side as if he were just arriving for the first time. When others were being told to go, he would often hide so as to avoid being included in the expulsion edict. It developed into an elaborate game in which Maharaji was a participant. A was a master of his game. He seemed to have a special sense that told him where Maharaji would be any moment, and he managed to be there waiting. Others tried to compete in this game, but none approached A's totally one-pointed, or depending upon how you saw it, totally selfish behavior. Others were hampered by guilt or compassion for others, feeling such, if mentioned, elicited only an uncomprehending look from A. Devotee B was an entirely different story. If Maharaji sent us to help in the kitchen, B would remain peeling potatoes long after others had given up and drifted back to Maharaji. He would stay until the last potato was peeled and then look for more work. Although he had been trained as an attorney in the United States, his service and humility at the temple were so outstanding that soon he was in charge of kitchens and storerooms. He remained in the temple performing the purest service for 5 years until he was evicted by the government. No job was too menial, or there was no evidence of personal pride about his humility, nor any effort to get attention for his work. It was truly as if he came closest to God through his service. He hardly ever came near Maharaji, and when he did, it was usually only to touch his feet and then go back to his duties. Devotees like A often infuriated other devotees because they seemed to be monopolizing Maharaji, while devotees like B aroused respect and sometimes guilt in others. Yet intuitively we knew that each in his own way was a pure devotee, and Maharaji obviously loved them both. As varied as were all the ways of seeing and being with Maharaji, so were his reactions. He responded to each according to his or her capacity to absorb. In the infinitely changing nature of Maharaji's behavior, each person found that what he or she needed. Because he stood nowhere, he was like a mirror, showing each devotee the Baba or Guru that they projected. Often this one act he felt simultaneously disparate needs of a dozen devotees. Who can say with this sense they are like the sky? Maharaji's mind was completely clear. He would seem to have no thoughts. Only that which Bhagwan willed would come into his mind. Like a cloud it would come and then, such action that thought would produce, and again like a cloud it would pass. His mind was always clear. He used to speak to the devotees according to the person trapped, according to what line of devotion the person was following.